Did you know that APS-X, the best round for the MP7, won't kill on a headshot even without a helmet? There are multiple layers as to why this is either surprising or not, depending on how closely you've been following Tarkov's ballistics changes over the years. So to explain it today, we're looking at headshots, ammunition, and class 4 head protection to figure out which bullets are worth using at medium ranges and which could be cheating you out of kills without you knowing. There are three situations that are important here. 1. The ammo that won't kill through a class 4 helmet despite penning, because the class 4 armor gives enough protection to reduce the incoming bullet's damage down below 35, i.e. the health of a head hitbox. 2. The ammo that won't kill at range even without a helmet due to the damage drop-off that occurs over distance. And 3. The ammos that won't kill through a class 4 helmet at range due to a combination of the first two working together. So to the first situation, those bullets that will not kill a PMC even if you hit them in the head, and even if you manage to penetrate their armor, it will not do enough damage to headshot them and deal 35 HP to actually take them down. This does seem kind of surprising, but I've done a previous video about this in the past and I'm repeating those results, which is the reason why I wanted to share some of this stuff with you today, because a few things have changed. When a bullet is fired and goes through the air and hits an enemy player on the head, let's just ignore the distance section for a moment. We'll just talk about point blank at this point. When a bullet is fired and hits a piece of armor, say class 4, what the game does is it checks the bullet's penetration against the armor's class. Now again, there's going to be no drop off here because we're at point blank. But what this means, and especially for a class 4 helmet, which is what most players wear and is what you really should be aiming to get through if you want to kill them, is that you need to be able to pen through the helmet and deal enough damage to beat that HP threshold of the head of 35. Now the reason why some of these bullets fail is that there is a damage reduction applied to bullets that penetrate through armors, and helmets are no different. They're exactly the same in this particular regard. Normally, when we're thinking about armors and bullets with penetration, we have the rule of thumb of 10 times the armor class roughly gets you to about where a bullet will start penetrating that particular armor. So let's talk about class 4 armor, because this is what's important for the helmets. And to penetrate that armor, we should be using ammo with a penetration of 40. While this is strictly true, because that will give you a penetration chance of about 90%, what this doesn't take into account is the fact that for another 10 pen higher than this, i.e. from 40 to 50, you actually suffer from damage reduction until you raise up out of that 50 threshold. So it's kind of like 10 times the armor class plus another 10 to ignore damage reduction entirely, and a lot of bullets end up falling into that category. This can happen to a variety of different ammo, and I've got a chart here and I'll show you exactly how this works. So first off, we have 9x19 PvP. This is the best cartridge, quote unquote, for the 9mm weapons. And what happens here is because the damage is 44, this was newly nerfed this wipe. I'm not entirely sure why, I think it was slightly too much, but anyway, that's neither here nor there. And the penetration of 39, you can see that the mitigation here of a minus 25% that the helmet applies to the bullet means that the ending damage is actually 33, and you will not kill a player if you shoot at them wearing a ULAC, for example. All of the other ammos in this particular table follow this similar sort of pattern. You can see from the chart here that basically the more damage that they do, the less pen they need to reach this threshold, and vice versa. So the most damaging bullet that we have in this grid is M855 with 54 damage, but its pen is only 31. This does incidentally mean that its pen chance is only 13%, so you're unlikely to get a pen anyway, but even if you do, you won't kill them because you'll only do 32 damage. Conversely, the most penetrating round that we have in this table is FMJ SX with 40 pen, which as we said is like a 90% pen chance to go through. So you'd think, well, that's going to kill my target. Well, in fact not. Because the damage is only 43, this gets reduced by 23% and you end up with 33 damage as well. Exactly the same as if you'd shot them with PvP, and again, they don't die. In the heat of battle, often this is kind of missed because you don't notice it, because you're firing so many bullets you don't really know whether you hit them in the head or the chest, or you hit them 2 times or 3 times here or there. It's very difficult to know, but this definitely has an impact on some fights and the ability of certain guns to win them. This table, for the most part, is SMG ammo, so as we said, there's PvP, we've got BT here for the SR2M, JSP and FMJ for the MP7, L191 and SS190 for the P90. We do have a handful of intermediate caliber rounds, the PP, M855 and Mark 318 Motto SOST, which is for 556 and 545 respectively. And these ones end up being here because the penetration and damage combination is just a little bit too low. So you do have to be careful about using PP and M855 in your weapons, PP especially because it looks relatively okay with 34 pen, but it has this odd feature. So this works even at point blank. We're not talking about any distance here. Even if you are right up to the enemy PMC and you press the gun into their helmet and you fire, you won't kill them, even if you penetrate. It can be quite surprising if you haven't heard this before. So the second scenario that is important to understand is the distance drop-off. So this is where a bullet won't kill an enemy PMC, even if you hit them in the head, and even if they're not wearing a helmet, which is another weird scenario where you imagine they probably should die, really. And here we have another table. A lot of these are SMGs again, but there is an incidence of a couple of rounds with very high pen and very low damage. The high pen doesn't do anything for you if the damage falls below 35 over range. This is where it's important to drill into APSX a little bit more in detail. So I said at the beginning, APSX won't kill with a headshot, and this may or may not be surprising, depending on how much you've followed the Ballistics of Tarkov over the last couple of years. And this is because, originally, APSX would never kill when you shot somebody in the head with it, because it had strictly 35 damage. As soon as the bullet left the barrel, this is ever since damage drop-off came into play, the damage would be 34.7 or something, and you wouldn't kill them, despite hitting them right in the head from point blank. This was the same for a very long time, until the changes came to the armor hitbox system recently. And something happened when they changed the head hitbox to a different set of hitboxes. They added some hitboxes and changed the way that they function. And when they introduced that, what started happening was APSX started killing PMCs from any distance. And I noticed this because APSX was a very useful round to test things like ricochets off glasses or headshots, because it didn't kill the user, which meant you didn't have to restart the raid again. So I've used APSX a lot in testing this, and this is where I found this out originally. So the theory was that there was something to do with these hitboxes, which meant that high pen rounds were penetrating through multiple head hitboxes at the same time, causing them to kill our target PMC, despite the fact that it wasn't actually dealing 35 damage, which you could see if you shot them in the arm, for example. You could shoot them in the arm and deal 34, and then shoot them in the head and they would die, which obviously doesn't make any sense because the head hitbox is 35. So something else was going on. So what adds to this and makes it even more interesting is that now that I've come back to test it, this no longer happens. The system has been refined, the ballistic system has changed a bit, they've changed some of the hitboxes and a few other things when they amended the plates and stuff like that, and I haven't tested this since then. And upon coming back to test it, APSX no longer kills at any range anymore, but it also does kill at point blank. It's almost as if the damage of the bullets is carried out of the barrel for a certain number of meters, and then the damage drop-off starts to kick in. And where I tested this, it came to about 5 or 6 meters with APSX. So you have to be really close within spitting distance, otherwise it won't one-shot them. But if you're point blank and you hit them in the head with it, they will actually die now. The other ones in this category, like 9x18 PM PBM and 9x19 PvP, this is due to these bullets being pistol calibers, and they don't have a very good ballistic profile, which means that when they fly through the air, they slow down quite quickly. This means that the damage falls under 35 quite fast, and as you can see for the Clin, this happens at 25 meters, and with PvP, this happens at 50 meters. So they are still usable, and again, remember, we're talking about an unprotected head here, so even if you hit somebody in the jaws with the Clin over 25 meters, you'll have to hit them again before they die, and with the MP5, it's 50. Now you can imagine that FMJ SX for the MP7 is in a similar camp, but because the ballistic profile of that bullet is so much superior to a regular pistol round, that actually goes out to 210 meters. It is a very, very long way, and you don't have to worry about it. So if you do hit them in the eyes with FMJ and they're not wearing something like the CQCM mask, then you will kill them. The final couple are the notorious intermediate caliber rounds, Igolnik for 545, M995 and SSAP for 556, which are the ones with the lowest damage, 37, 42 and 38, as you can see here. When the system first came in, it was very short as to the distance at which they wouldn't kill, but it's been amended since and has stayed the same for quite a long time, and so PPBS and SSAP, the least damaging rounds within the intermediate calibers, will headshot up to about 90 meters away. It's not as far as you'd like, but at least it's something. So, onto our third main list. This is about a combination between the first list and the second. So we're talking about which rounds fail to get to the 35 head HP threshold over a certain distance because of the damage drop-off and pen drop-off working in tandem. Pretty much everything about the bullets gets used in this calculation. So whether it has good ballistic profile or not, what the penetration is, how quickly that damage drops off on those particular bullets. Because in this situation, what we're looking for are rounds that have okay pen, but kind of close to 40, and also damage that's sort of low that could be eroded. And what's going to happen is, as the bullet leaves the barrel and travels through the air, the damage and the pen are going to drop together. By the time that it hits the helmet, the damage and the pen are going to be lower than the listed bullet's stats on the round itself, and then the damage calculation is going to roll. That damage is going to be reduced further if there is a penetration, and then the resulting damage we would hope is higher than 35, but for some of these rounds, this is not the case. This one is obviously distance dependent, and it's a little bit more complicated because the pen and damage reduction actually makes it doubly worse. As it flies through the air, the damage goes down. The penetration also goes down, which means that when it hits the helmet actually acts on a lower penetration bullet to reduce the damage even more than it would have done if it was close, because a 40 pen round will be reduced by a lot more than a 50 pen round, which is 0. It's a gradient between those two. And so as it flies through the air, the further it goes, the damage gets lower, but the pen gets lower. So the resulting damage through the helmet also gets lower, kind of gets doubly lower. And this is partly what makes it difficult to work out, because it's a little bit iterative. Everything kind of depends on everything else. So through a process of trial and error testing, these are the bullets that are kind of around that threshold that you have to be careful of. We already looked at APSX, this is at 6 meters. We have the 7N42 Zubilo round for the SR2M submachine gun, and this one falls off at a distance of about 10 meters, so you won't be able to pen a class 4 helmet anymore after a distance of 10 meters. Shorter than that and it'll be fine, but outside of that and it won't be. The two next shortest that we have on the list that we do have to be a bit careful of is 545BT and 556 M856A1. These are quite readily used bullets and they actually look pretty good on paper, and out of the barrel they have a roughly 50% chance to get through a class 4 helmet straight up. But if you reach over 50 or 60 meters, this won't happen anymore. So just make sure that you're not going to be sniping people with these rounds, expecting them to die when they've got a ULAC on, because even if you pen, you won't kill them. It's a very unfortunate thing about these bullets, and you will need to upgrade to BP on the 555 side and M855A1 on the 556 side in order to ensure that out to longer ranges. You can see that here with M855A1 at 110 and BP at 120. These two are very similar. M995 gets a very small range boost simply due to the increased penetration despite the lower damage, interestingly. And there's a handful of others such as M62 Tracer for 300 Blackout, which is at 60 meters. Not that really that many people use that bullet. And another interesting one, 762 PS, which won't headshot over 110 meters anymore. That is quite a long way for using an AK or something like that. But if you are using it at longer ranges, say you're using an SKS, you just have to be a little careful about PS. You probably want to upgrade that to PP, which you can buy on the flick. Now I do have one extra section here to show you, which wasn't really on my first list of 3, but there's a second set of rounds which don't have a good chance to penetrate a class 4 helmet if they fly through the air and hit it, even though they would actually kill the user if the penetration does occur. And these are the ones just to be worried about. We've seen a lot of these already before on this filter. Things like PvP and 7N2 can't kill at all, neither can FMJ and SS190, and we've also got some interesting ones here like 545BT, where the threshold for this is underneath 50% penetration. You could argue that this could be slightly higher, but basically all of these numbers would just be a bit lower if that was the case. But I've settled on 50% pen or more is the penetration chance it would need to have for me to list the distance down as the threshold here. And so BT, because it has a 55% chance right at the beginning because of its 37 pen, you're kind of in the danger zone right from the word go. This is slightly different to M856A1 because this has 38 pen and it doesn't lose damage and pen that quickly over range because it's a very fast bullet. You get 40 meters to play with because of that one extra pen. Now I was quite surprised that a lot of the others actually ended up being alright. A lot of the sort of snipery bullets end up being fine. So things like M80, you have a 50% chance to pen even up to about 190 meters. Obviously you probably wanted to pen a little bit more than that, so you got to make sure that you stay within that range quite significantly if you don't want every other shot to count. But you can see how you get a 50 meter boost for M62 by getting that extra 3 pen there. And all the rounds for 762 by 54 are good, but interestingly, LPX gets a massive boost over T46, partly because of its ballistic properties and because of its one more pen. I personally wouldn't have thought it would make that much difference, but when you actually run the model, it does. And PS gets an even bigger boost as well, which does make sense because it has 3 more pen there. But LPS has some more favorable ballistic properties than T46 that allow it to fly that little bit further and still retain 50% pen chance. So what are the conclusions here? SMGs will rarely cleanly tap a class 4 helmet at closer than point blank, and even then, a lot of them just simply won't do that at all. 545 BP or M855A1 are the best middle ground for the intermediate calibers. They get you fast fire rates and low recoil, but also you can still take people out at distance. If you need to make a far shot, obviously you need to move up to 7.62 NATO. And what's interesting about these results is it's pretty much self-explanatory. You could probably have told me this yourself just from playing the game and your understanding of it, but now we have the data to back it up, and you can also see where the pinch points are for some of these particular bullets and why some may pen and some won't in certain situations. So as usual, big shout out to all my patrons, and as always, have fun in your raids.